She never expected the love she had waited her whole life for to end with a stinging slap across her cheek, right there, in front of everyone. It was Saturday afternoon when Lydia Carter's world collapsed. The cafe on Maple Avenue was busy, as usual, with young couples and old friends sipping lattes beneath strings of fairy lights. She thought the day would bring a proposal. He had been dropping hints for weeks, promising a moment she'd never forget. And it was unforgettable, just not in the way she imagined. As soon as her fiancé, Tyler, raised his voice, people turned their heads. She tried to lower hers, mumbling that maybe they could talk later. But he wouldn't have it. His face flushed red. His hands trembled. When he demanded to know if she'd been talking behind his back, she only managed to whisper that he was scaring her. Then the slap came, sharp, humiliating, final. A hush fell over the cafe. A few gasps, the clatter of a dropped spoon, a child crying somewhere behind her. But no one moved. No one said anything. Lydia felt her face burning, tears threatening to spill over as Tyler glared down at her like she was something he'd scraped off his shoe. In that endless moment, Lydia wished she could disappear. And then a voice broke the silence. "Hey! That's enough." She turned, dazed, and saw a man step between them. He wasn't particularly tall or imposing. In fact, he looked tired, like he'd come straight from work in his rumpled button-down and scuffed shoes. But there was something steady in his eyes, something that said he would not stand by and let this happen. Tyler scoffed. "Mind your business." But the man didn't move. He glanced over his shoulder at Lydia, his gaze softening. "Are you okay?" It was the first time anyone had asked her that in years. Tyler's jaw worked furiously, but after a moment, he shook his head in disgust and stormed off, shoving his way out the door. The bell jingled behind him. The room began to breathe again. Lydia pressed a shaking hand to her cheek. The man was still watching her, searching her expression for permission to stay. "I'm sorry," she murmured. I don't even know your name." He offered a gentle smile. "Evan." He glanced behind him, where a little girl with curly hair peeked out from a booth, hugging a battered stuffed rabbit. "And that's Mia. We just wanted to make sure you were okay." A tear slid down Lydia's cheek. She nodded, unable to speak. 2 weeks later. Lydia tried to pretend nothing had changed. She went to work. She paid her bills. But at night, she sat alone in her quiet apartment, replaying everything over and over. How had she let it get this far? How had she let someone convince her she was worthless? One evening, she found herself back at the same cafe, almost against her will. She sat by the window, the same window she had been standing in front of when her heart broke. That's where Evan found her. "Mind if we join you?" he asked, nodding toward Mia. Lydia almost said no. She almost ran. But then Mia climbed into the chair across from her, setting her stuffed rabbit on the table like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Hi," the little girl said shyly. "Daddy says you were very brave." Lydia swallowed hard. "I don't feel brave." Evan pulled out the other chair and sat down. He didn't try to argue or offer empty words. He just listened. And maybe that was what she needed most, someone to witness her pain without trying to fix it. Little by little, she told them everything. The way Tyler had chipped away at her confidence until she believed she deserved nothing better. The way she thought love meant sacrificing herself to keep the peace. Evan listened without judgment. And when she finally fell silent, exhausted and ashamed, he only said, "You deserve so much more." Over the next few months, Lydia and Evan became unlikely friends. He never pushed her. He never asked for anything. He simply showed up. Sometimes with Mia, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with a quiet word of encouragement. He told her about his own struggles, how his wife had left when Mia was still a baby, how he had spent years feeling like a failure. But he'd learned something important: no one could steal your worth unless you handed it to them. It took Lydia a long time to understand that she was allowed to take hers back. Bit by bit, she rebuilt her life. She started therapy. She took a new job. She even signed up for a painting class she had always been too embarrassed to try. And every time she felt like slipping back into old patterns, she would remember that day in the cafe, when a stranger had stood up for her simply because it was the right thing to do. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Lydia invited Evan and Mia to her tiny studio apartment to see her first finished painting. She had poured every bit of her healing into it, the fear, the loneliness, and finally, the hope. Evan stood beside her, studying the canvas. It was a portrait of a woman standing on a shoreline, her hair blowing back, her eyes closed as if she were finally free. "It's beautiful," he said softly. Mia nodded solemnly. "She looks brave." Lydia blinked back tears. "She is." For the first time in her life, she believed it. And maybe, she thought, this was the love she had been searching for all along. Not the desperate grasping to be chosen, but the quiet certainty that she was worthy, just as she was. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Every week, we share true and inspiring stories to remind you that no matter how broken you feel, you can always rise again. Thank you for watching, and never forget, your worth is not defined by how others treat you, but by the courage you find to stand back up.